The memories of my time in the 8th grade at Professor Elias Caldas State School still haunt me on sleepless nights, like fragments of a persistent nightmare that reason strives in vain to dispel. It wasn't about occasional bullying or exam pressure. It was something visceral, a sinister breach that opened up in our everyday reality, exposing horrors the human mind was never meant to contemplate. I remember vividly that fateful afternoon on a cold Tuesday in May. Recess bustled with the carefree energy of teenagers, the distant echo of a soccer ball ricocheting on the sports court, and the sharp laughter of girls gathered in small groups. I was leaning against a pillar in the covered courtyard, absorbed in reading a macabre Edgar Allan Poe story, when a boy named Tiago, known for his skeptical and almost unflappable nature, came running toward me, his face ashen and his eyes wide with a genuine terror I never imagined seeing on him. He stammered incoherent words, pointing frantically at the densely wooded area behind the school, a place most students avoided due to its perpetual shadows and reputation for being a refuge for unwanted creatures. Intrigued and, I confess, with a morbid curiosity awakened by Tiago's fragmented words about something glowing eyes, very big, I put down my book and approached the edge of the woods. The afternoon light was already starting to wane, casting long, distorted shadows that gave the scene an even more sinister atmosphere. The air was strangely still, an oppressive silence muffling the sounds of recess as if nature itself was holding its breath. I took a few hesitant steps into the thicket, the damp earth and a carpet of dry leaves crackling beneath my sneakers. An unsettling sensation settled over me, a tingling at the nape of my neck and an inexplicable conviction that I was being watched by something unseen. Suddenly, a gust of cold wind swept through the clearing, stirring the tree canopies and producing a sound reminiscent of a collective whisper laden with malicious intent. At that same moment, a chill ran down my spine, and I distinctly felt an icy breath brush the skin of my neck, accompanied by a faint sulphurous odor that made me recoil abruptly, my heart pounding in my chest. There was nothing there, no physical presence to justify the overwhelming sense of primordial terror. That disturbing incident was etched into my mind, a subtle shadow hovering over the normalcy of the days that followed. Yet nothing could have prepared me for what happened on the following Friday morning. The second class had just begun. The geography teacher, a soft-spoken lady with thick-rimmed glasses named Ms. Helena, was calmly lecturing about tectonic plates when the intercom blared abruptly, cutting her off. The tense, slightly trembling voice of the vice principal, a usually jovial, good-humored man named Mr. Otavio, echoed through the speakers, announcing a code Omega and instructing all teachers to lock doors, turn off the lights, and keep students in absolute silence without providing any further explanation. The initial confusion quickly turned into silent panic. Miss Helena, visibly shaken, locked the door, rushed to switch off the lights, and gestured for us to crouch beneath our desks, her face pale in the dim light streaming through the windows. The ensuing silence was deafening, broken only by the nervous whispers of some classmates and the pounding of my own heart. Darkness took over the classroom, making it hard to distinguish shapes around us. I glanced at the windows and noticed the morning sunlight had vanished, replaced by an inexplicable darkness that seemed to swallow the outside world. An intense cold invaded the room, making my hair stand on end. Suddenly, a sharp, shrill sound echoed from the hallway, followed by a dull thud and the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. Muffled screams could be heard briefly before being cut off abruptly. The terror intensified, palpable and suffocating. Then, through the crack under the door, we saw an incandescence, a pulsating greenish light of a sickly hue, briefly illuminating the hallway and revealing distorted, elongated shadows that matched nothing we knew. Along with the light, a wet, dragging sound began approaching, as if something heavy and viscous was moving across the floor, leaving behind a sticky, invisible trail. The fear I felt in that moment transcended anything I could have imagined, terrifying in its intensity and utter senselessness. The wet sound drew closer and closer to our door, accompanied by a strange rustling, as if scales were scraping the ground. The greenish light pulsed erratically, casting dancing shadows that seemed to come alive on the hallway walls. I began to smell the sharp, metallic scent of blood, mingled with that same sulphurous odor I had sensed in the woods days before. Several students began to cry silently, paralyzed by terror and unable to make a sound. Miss Helena, despite the fear etched on her face, tried to reassure us with hesitant gestures, but her eyes, fixed on the locked door, betrayed the horror, consuming her within. We remained crouched under the desks for what felt like an eternity, every second stretched by unbearable tension. The dragging noise finally stopped right outside our door, and the greenish light intensified, bathing the crack with a spectral glow. A sepulchral silence descended upon the corridor, more frightening than even the noises that preceded it. We held our breath, afraid any movement might draw that sinister being's attention. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed on the door, followed by violent scratching that sent wood splinters flying. The handle jerked suddenly, despite being locked. From within, a muffled cry escaped some of my classmates' lips. The door slowly started to yield, bending under a monstrous force. Through the widening crack, we briefly glimpsed something misshapen and tentacular, glistening wet and repulsive. Then everything went dark again, and a heavy silence fell once more. After what felt like an eternity, we heard hurried footsteps and muffled voices in the hallway, which gradually grew louder and more recognizable. It was the inspectors and other school staff, their voices laced with shock and confusion. One by one, the doors were unlocked, and we were escorted into the courtyard, where we found a chaotic and disturbing scene. Dark, viscous stains on the corridor floor, shards of glass everywhere, and a nauseating smell that turned our stomachs. In the days that followed, the school became a stage for rumors and speculation. We were dismissed from classes for nearly a month, and when we returned, the atmosphere was palpably different. An odd silence hung in the corridors, and the teachers' and staff's faces bore expressions of tension and evasiveness. No official explanation was given for what happened that day. We were merely told that an isolated incident had occurred and that authorities were investigating. However, the unspoken truth lingered in the air, cold and menacing. We began to hear strange stories. The librarian, a kind woman in her early 50s named Ms. Keelia, known for her love of mystery novels, simply vanished. No one knew her whereabouts. The same happened with Mr. Ottavio, the vice principal who had announced Code Omega, and one of the night janitors, a burly, taciturn man named Gyro. Their unexplained disappearances fueled even more fear and uncertainty. We, the students who lived through that day of terror, were never the same. Many of us suffered from recurring nightmares, unexplained anxiety, and a deep aversion to darkness. Some developed mysterious health problems, such as chronic fatigue and persistent migraines. Rumors circulated among parents that some students exhibited strange symptoms like rashes and sensitivity to light, but nothing was ever officially confirmed. Over time, the incident was hushed up, swept under the rug of the school's history. But for those of us who were there, the memory of the greenish light, the dragging sound, and that paralyzing terror remains vivid and unforgettable, a grim reminder that there are horrors science cannot explain, lurking in the dark corners of our reality. If you're enjoying this immersive journey into the darkest, most terrifying tales, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming stories that will keep you up at night. And to make this experience even more intense, Why not share in the comments which part of this account gave you the biggest chills? Or if you've ever experienced something inexplicable and disturbing, share your story with us. Darkness loves company. Years have gone by, but the shadow of that fateful day at Professor Elias Caldas State School has never fully faded from my mind. I tried to move on, to build a normal life, but memories of the greenish light and the dragging sound would occasionally resurface in my dreams, bringing the same wave of cold terror. I spoke with some other students who were present that day, and each carried their own invisible scars, their own fragmented versions of the unexplainable. Some believed in an alien invasion, others in a scientific experiment gone terribly wrong, and there were even those who whispered about portals to other dimensions briefly opened in our reality. The truth, however, remained dark and elusive, cloaked in an official silence that only fueled the darkest theories. I recall a particularly disturbing conversation with a former classmate named Beatrice, always a rational and skeptical person. She told me that after the incident, she began having vivid, terrifying dreams of shadowy, tentacled figures slithering through the school corridors. The most disturbing part, according to her, was the sense of familiarity these nightmares brought, as though she had seen those creatures before, somewhere deep within her repressed memory. Another classmate, Lucas, once spirited and playful, became reclusive and paranoid after the event. He avoided dark places and startled at any sudden noise, convinced that it could return at any moment. For me, the worst part was the persistent feeling that something had fundamentally changed in the world around us that day. It was as though a veil had briefly lifted, revealing a threatening, sinister undercurrent to reality normally hidden from our senses. My faith in the day-to-day normalcy had been shattered, replaced by a constant unease and the uncomfortable certainty that forces beyond our comprehension can tear through our world at any moment, bringing with them unspeakable terror. The lack of official explanations only deepened that sense of vulnerability and uncertain dread. The authorities' silence was deafening, a wall that kept us from finding any comfort or closure for the horror we experienced. And so, the story of Professor Elias Caldas State School became a dark legend whispered on the city's corners, an inexplicable horror story most prefer to forget. But for those who survived that day of darkness and silence, the wound remains open, a constant reminder that terror can manifest in the most unexpected places, breaking the fragile skin of our reality and confronting us with horrors that strain sanity itself. And perhaps the most frightening lesson of all is realizing that not all monsters leave visible traces, and not all nightmares vanish when you wake. Some remain with us, lurking in the shadows of our minds, waiting for the right moment to return. If you made it to the end of this dark journey, thank you so much for joining us in this exploration of the unexplainable. If this story pulled you in and made you question the boundaries of our reality, don't forget to hit like and share this video with your friends who also enjoy a good scare. We really want to know what you think. Which part left you most apprehensive? Have you ever experienced something similar, or do you know of a scary story you'd like to share with our community? Leave your comment below, and if you're not yet part of our growing legion of horror enthusiasts, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next accounts that promise to send shivers down your spine. Your participation and your stories truly enrich our community. Share your experiences, your theories, and what you took away from this account. Together, we can dive even deeper into the mysteries that haunt our world.